Kyle.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to episode number 248 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We are recording on September the 29th, 2024. My name is Eric, host of the show, based in Southern Ontario, hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, and computer geek. As a first responder, witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events and started a small preparedness company to help people get better prepared for at least 72 hours, if not longer. And yes, Kyle, 901, we're here now.
And I'm Jeff. I am based in Central Ontario, but I'm in sunny, well, not so sunny now, but Southern Ontario for the weekend. I'm a target shooter, ham radio operator, general overall handyman, and weather nerd.
And I'm Brad. I'm in Eastern Ontario, part-time amateur prepper, constantly trying to better myself.
And I'm the frugal gunny. I'm an off-gridder, a shooter, hunter, fisher, gatherer, trapper type, basically a generalist. I only recently came to accept that I'm a prepper, relatively anyway. I encourage and live a mobility approach to survival.
And I'm Terry. I live in sunny Central Ontario, the official grand poobah of the annual Preppers Meet, a starving indie author, terrible hunter, pathetic fisherman, and proud Ford owner. Always got to get that in there.
Oh, we're going to start with that again, are we?
It's quite the rounded out description of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Surprised you got here tonight owning a Ford.
I didn't have to drive anywhere. I was already here.
Well, there you go.
Happens when you're broken down. Got it.
Oh, if we continue here, if you want to help support the show and buy some swag, we have both the Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt that Terry's wearing there and the tactical Velcro patch at www.prepperpodcast.ca. All the proceeds help go and cover our podcast costs. What happened to the generator?
It was in there. It got cut out. We can put it back.
We're talking solar tonight, so we're parking the generator for this evening.
All right, perfect.
And if you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and submit a review wherever you found us. We want your feedback, even if it's bad. We also invite you to reach out and to tell us something you learned this week. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
All right, so we've got some empowering content for you in this episode. We're going to start out with some relevant news, update you on our personal preps since the last episode, which was a little while ago. We've been MIA for a few Sundays. Then we're going to get into the main topic. We're talking about solar power tonight. Let's move into the news.
So I've got a couple articles. Obviously, the first one, and I'll touch more on it in my weather blurb, but Hurricane Helene came ashore there last week. So far, the death toll is at 90. I imagine that will increase substantially once they start getting into the more remote areas of Tennessee and North Carolina and that are cut off. So it was pretty devastating. Again, like I say, I'll touch on that more. And my other one is a supply chain issue. I've mentioned it a few times in preceding podcasts. The East Coast port workers are set to go on strike at midnight Monday night or 12:01 a.m., whatever time you want, Tuesday morning. So there will, if there's no agreement reached or government intervention, they will be on strike starting Tuesday. So they won't be unloading any ships or doing anything like that. So if that happens, be prepared for some supply chain issues to start popping up probably in the not too distant future.
And for me, well, there's been enough interesting stuff in the news this past week or so. Enough to make a few podcasts, probably, especially if you're in the communication world. But yeah, just having said all that there have been rumblings in the Prepperverse that the October 7th event in Israel last year, the anniversary is coming up in another week or so. And the prudent prepper would avoid large crowds and big gatherings and so on for the few days preceding and after that, because, yeah, these things do tend to repeat themselves, and they could happen around here. So not to panic or anything, but just be on the just think about it, because chances of anything affecting us is pretty slim. But one doesn't hurt to be prepared.
Absolutely. There's been,
Sound advice.
everybody knows, lots and lots of protests over the years. So
Yes.
what better time to do the Hail Mary than on the anniversary?
Yeah.
Yep. And an angry crowd doesn't pick and choose who they're angry at.
No.
So
That is true too.
Stay home and watch a good flick for a few days. Reruns of the Prepper
Sure.
podcast. That'll be good to watch.
ooh, yes.
Yeah.
Good call.
Kyle's got a good one there in the chat.
Hey, 4 more can openers right on.
Order.
Yeah.
Hopefully they get here the same time as my
Nice.
trampoline.
One can only hope they use the trampolines to deliver the can openers, and the trampolines follow short thereafter, Kyle.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's good. Well done. Well done.
That's
All right. With that segue, how about we move into what we've done lately for preps? We already know what Kyle's done.
Yeah, he's been on Amazon. Bit of fuel rotation, backyard cleanup, took down a couple of trees they started as weeds and now they're formed into trees, those freaking Manitoba maples. Especially where my one of my gardens is supposed to go in the spring. So clean that all up. Started a little bit of work inside our mudroom addition on the house that was here when we got here, and it's just kind of been a bit of a catch-all. So cleaning that out, cleaning all that stuff up. And I started working on a portable light system made from those plastic ammo cans there Princess Auto had on sale a while back. Grabbed some of those and trying to work on a system running off my Ryobi batteries to a set of emergency lights that run on 6-volt. So waiting on a couple of pieces to come in and then do a little live test and see what happens.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Since the last episode, I have performed my monthly generator tests. Everything went according to plan there. Did some fuel rotation and continue to work on the on my firewood.
Very nice. Well, for myself, it's been a whole bunch of work, a little bit more work, just to mix things up a little bit more work, but it is what it is. Outside of that, did the generator check. Always do that around this time of year, just before the evil snow begins to fly, just to make sure all was good. It's a good thing I did, because detected a small little oil leak. Doesn't seem like it's going to be anything too major to look after. It looks like one of the hoses is just old and needs to be replaced. But that's why we check our things, make sure they work, right? And a small little thing like that could have been undetected for a good period of time until all of a sudden, So, and then looking at getting that fixed up. And then outside of that, I know we talked about the hurricanes that have gone through. I've been just listening to one of the repeaters out in North Carolina. So if you check out Broadcastify, you can look up W4HTP. And that's a repeater system out there. And you can actually hear the communicators in the EOC passing messages back and forth, lining up people to go check on each other and just providing emergency communication services to that area, because they have no power, they have no cell phone, they have no internet. There is nothing but this repeater system is up and running, and it's quite interesting to just sit and listen and realize the ability of the operators to get messages back and forth and coordinate things. And they're doing things like allowing people to pass traffic back and forth, make phone calls, verify people are okay, but they're also passing out community information like the following gas station has gas right now, the following shop is open, the following roads are not. It's really interesting just to listen and see what can be done in an emergency situation via communications. So if you're looking to listen, they'll obviously be up for the next little while. So head over to Broadcastify and check for W4HTP, because it's very interesting. A very interesting listen.
Now, that Broadcastify, that's an app?
It's a website.
It's a website.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can just Google Broadcastify, and then W4HTP is the call sign of that specific repeater. And it goes, I've listened to it all kinds of different times, and there's been somebody on it at any different time during regular, like daytime. The Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, is running, and you'll hear a ham operator on there running net control, and then you hear all the other operators calling in as well. Of interest, there have been non-ham radio operators also invited to use the frequencies at this time because it's an emergency situation and no other forms of communication are available. So it's been interesting to have the net controller welcome that as well. So
Nice.
it's a neat listen. Yeah, it's a neat listen to just sit back and hear what emergency communication sounds like, and it's very, very well set up as well. You can tell some of the folks in there have a background in communications.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's something I'm just fascinated with, and I'm hoping you're going to hold my hand when I'm ready to start buying gear. But first though, I've got to move all my solar gear. So this is a big part of what I've been up to, guys. I've been getting ready to sell my cabin. So long story short, the land around my cabin all got sold to this farmers collective that's based out of Toronto and run by apparently somebody who's a member of the World Economic Forum. And so they've sawed down all of the timber, all of the forest that surrounds my spot, and they're going to turn it into a canola growing operation with all the pesticides and all the fertilizers that go along with it. So the cabin is done. It's lost its purpose for being. So I'm going to go decommission all of that solar equipment, and I'm selling off the cabin. So that means I'm going to have about 800 watts worth of solar power and 560 amp hours of battery sitting around waiting to do something. So I'll figure out what to do with all that at some point. But currently waiting.
You can store it at my house.
It's just going to say, if you think it's going to be lonely or something, I'll gladly keep it company.
Yep.
If y'all want to help me out how to put that onto a little trailer so I can deploy it anywhere,
Yes.
I think that's what I'd like to do with it all. We'll see how I make that happen. But
We'll talk later.
We'll talk later. I know Brad's been Kyle, Brad's been working on a project, so I'm gonna hopefully pick his brain on this one. But in line with the whole mobility aspect, I picked up and I'm waiting on it's on its way to me. A new Anchor Solix C300. So this is a portable power station, and it's got a fair amount of power from what I can see, 288 watt hours from what they're saying. So we'll see all about that. I'll be checking that out. I'll be putting through its paces, and I'll be seeing just how compatible it is with the various different solar panels I've got. So there's a whole pile of solar panels out there and all kinds of different ways you can rig them up. So I got to figure out what it will be able to handle. And the other thing I've been working on is I picked up a few more battery powered accessories to work with my battery systems, my power tool systems, so I can fix and make things and tear down my solar system in the dark. So part of that includes some lighting. So I'll probably be swapping gear stories with Brad at some point about portable lighting. I want to see what he's got going on. That's what I've had going on, other than work, and a whole pile
more work.
Yeah.
Well, I'm preparing to move to a new spot, and so that's been keeping me plenty busy. But I did find time to top off the fuel supplies and add a little bit to the pantry because, you never know what's going to happen down the road. There's lots of interesting things going on in the world. Never have too much food.
This is true. All right. With that,
Yes.
shall we move into the main topic? We're talking solar power tonight. I'm just going to hand the reins right over to Gunny because I'm here for the ride just like everybody else. Hoping to learn a thing or two.
Oh, it sounds like a lot of fun. All right, let's do this. So let's talk about solar power. What's it all about? So solar panels allow you to generate electricity. And mostly we're talking about one kind of power that solar panels create, and that is direct current. So there's, really quick recap. We got two kinds of current out there, DC and AC. And AC and DC, just like the band. No, it's good music, so let's not laugh too much about that. They're good. All right, AC, alternate current. This is the stuff that goes long distance. This is what powers your house. This is what powers, well, depending on where your house is. I should be specific. If you're North America, if you're in mostly Western Europe, chances are you've got house power at some point. Anywhere else in the world, maybe not. Maybe you've got your own solar rig, right? So whatever you've got running with solar, it's pretty much guaranteed, at least as far as I know, it's going to be running direct current, DC, direct current. Alternating current is what you have coming to your house. Alternating current is what gets generated from your typical hydro station. So hydro generation stations, they will be generating alternating current, and that's through the design of the turbines that they use to create power. I'm not going to get into the specifics of how those are built because that's a whole other rabbit hole. There's many different kinds of designs, but suffice to say, magnets are involved, spinning, water, power, right? All kinds of motive forces are then converted to electricity. And that electricity to be sent long distances is then converted, or rather it is running in alternating current mode. And alternating current is transmitted using 3 wires, right? You've got a neutral, you've got a ground, and you've got a live wire. And these go very, very long distances and a long ways. And when it gets to your house, in order to do things like charge your telephone or run your computer, which are all DC devices, direct current devices, things that traditionally we would run from a battery. Those kinds of devices require a different kind of current. And so what we have is we have a power block, something like not an inverter, because an inverter takes DC and converts it to AC, but you've got your charging blocks and you've got your power supplies that take your alternating current and then produce from that direct current. Direct current is more point-to-point type power, whereas alternating current looks more like a wave. If you can imagine a string, a rope that you hold between 2 people, and one person shakes that rope, gives it a single snap, you will see a wave travel down that rope back and forth. That's the nature of alternating current, and that's why it can travel long distances, whereas direct current is more like a flow of particles through a wire. I'm not going to get into the physics of it because there's way smarter people than me who explain all this good stuff. But suffice it to say, you've got direct current, which is what your small devices typically run, right? Things that don't have a lot of power requirements, things that are small, portable, things that are very precise will typically be using direct current. If it's running a AA or a AAA battery cell, we are talking about direct current, okay? So these are the 2 kinds of power that you've got. Your solar panels will usually generate direct current, which is great because if you want to power small devices, you don't necessarily need a whole lot of electronics to power that up. So for example, if you have a 12-volt solar panel, you can probably plug that right onto an ATV battery and charge and top up that battery with that little solar panel, as long as you've got the right amount of voltage and current, right? So this is another part of solar power and electricity basics. Yes, go ahead, Brad.
You'd be better to put a charge controller in the middle of that to make sure that the solar panel isn't producing more than what it's rated for, say 12 volts, but I have some Volkswagen 12-volt solar panels here that'll push out 20 plus.
Yes. You've got to be really careful what you're doing with solar panels. When solar panels were initially released to the consumer way back in the early thousands to like 2010 is when I was starting to buy them. You were seeing mostly voltages that were vehicle safe, because they would not really go much more than 14 volts. And so your max current and power that you're going to get out of your solar panel will be in the wintertime. And that's because solar panels need cooler temperatures to be as efficient as possible. The hotter the environment, the less power you're generating. So you will get peak solar generation out of your system in the wintertime. And that's why when you're going to go use some of those online solar calculators out there, you're going to have temperature dependencies. You're going to need to indicate what temperatures you expect to use your solar panels in, because they will generate more than they are rated for in temperatures that are colder than what they're tested for. Okay, so all of this comes together because in solar systems, you're dealing with electricity and all the physics that go along with generating that electricity, both from solar and then also storing it. Now, Brad was correct in that to use solar power safely, you should probably have some sort of charge controller. So here's why. Out of a solar panel or an array of solar panels, you're going to have a variability of current that is generated out of this thing. You're going to have moments where there is very little power, and you're going to have moments where there is a lot of power. And that's why if you've got these things connected to your house, it's a pretty complicated thing to feed that back into the grid, because all of a sudden you've got a whole other ball of wax, right? There's somebody else's wires and a whole living system you're trying to transmit that power into. So keep that for another thought. That's a whole other discussion. But for now, we're just going to talk pure solar, right? So when you've got your solar panels, you are going to have that variability. Every solar panel has a specification. So if you're playing around with solar, you should take a good look at the labels. If you're the kind of person that does not deal with numbers and specifications, and that's just too much for you, you should probably go for an all-in-one type system, where all you do is you connect things together and it's all going to work perfectly together. Nothing needs to be added. I'm talking about all-in-one type systems. So, and they are out there, right? Jackery, Anchor has a number of different types of plug-in systems that you can get.
Really easy. EcoFlow Delta.
EcoFlow Delta. I think, Renogy has a system now, which is plug and play. So there's a whole pile of these, right? So for those of you for which the looking at numbers and specs is too much, if it's overwhelming, I would consider one of those all-in-one type systems. And there's a variety of them out there. And I'm not going to sell you on one brand or another because they are all made pretty much in that other big country overseas that is economically wanting to run things. So you're going to get what you're going to get. And what I mean by that is that in all-in-one systems, if you have a fault with one of the components, you're kind of dealing now with a warranty issue. Right? When you're dealing with something that's home built or like this kind of stuff that I've built and you've seen me put on video on my channel, I'm dealing with a whole pile of individual warranties and then the mistakes of the assembler, myself. And then if you add the mistakes of the designer, myself, that's a whole lot of responsibility. If you're not ready to take that on, don't worry about it. Many people aren't. Back off. Go get that one and all-in-one piece. It's the way to go. If you don't want to mess around, if you don't like the idea of creating sparks in the wrong places at the wrong times, right? If you don't like the idea of reading a manual, that's another big one, right? A lot of folks can't read a manual or won't, and that's fine. Get the all-in-one system, right?
Kyle is in that boat with you. Of not
is he?
He posted there. Who reads the instruction booklets? Apparently, he doesn't.
Well, there's a lot of folks who won't, right? And that's who I think the all-in-one system is really for, right? So and that's one part of it. You got the solar. So the solar panels are not enough. You've got charge controllers, as Brad talked about. But what are you charging and what are you controlling? And that's where the storage portion comes into it. So a solar panel doesn't generate anything when it goes dark or when there's a cloud over top, or when your solar panels are covered because you parked your trailer under a bridge, right? Something like that. So typically your solar panels are also used with some sort of charging medium, some sort of storage medium. So that storage medium is usually batteries. Very short term, you can use capacitors. That's a whole other thing. Capacitors are typically used in a vehicle
with high spike demands, things like big car stereos, they will sometimes require big, large capacitors to deal with the huge draw that those subwoofers will go ahead and pull. Right, and this is how I learned a little bit about DC electronics and DC current, is by working on cars and audio systems. So that's where I come from. So little sidebar. Now coming back to it, your batteries, right? You need to store this electricity somewhere. In a car, we're typically using lead acid. And the reason we're using a lead acid battery is because it will work under most temperature conditions. And I mean down to minus 35. If you've got a good battery and it's got the right amount of cold cranking amps required to turn over your motor with the oil that it has and the conditions that are in that motor, it'll go ahead and spin that over. Lithium batteries, on the other hand, which are the favorite of the solar power crowd, they tend to be terrible at anything under minus 20. And I have to qualify this. They do not charge very well at all. In fact, you will damage them if you try charging them at anything colder than 0 degrees. So I hope every one of you who's got a cell phone is listening. So when you're trying to discharge a lithium battery at colder than 0 degrees, you are losing the efficiency very quickly. You cannot charge a lithium battery without damaging it when it is colder than 0 degrees Celsius. So for your cold weather outdoor applications, lithium is not so great, because what lithium needs at that point is to use some of its own power to keep itself warm using various kinds of tricks. And usually this involves heating elements. So winter safe lithium batteries typically have built-in heating elements, and they rob the battery of its own power to keep it warm so it can continue to safely discharge. This is essentially how your electric cars work. So that's why your electric cars have terrible efficiency in the wintertime. They have to stay warm to not damage themselves. So they run these heating elements, which withdraw more power from the battery just to not damage the battery while you're using it. And so you get maybe a quarter to a third of the capacity of your lithium batteries in the cold. All right, so I hope I've scared you all enough from lithium batteries in terms of really serious backup power in cold weather. They're not great.
I'll just bring this episode to an end now with all that. Or?
Now,
Hell no.
that being said, what did I do up in my cabin? So I built a cabin up north. No, I didn't build it. I bought it, but I retrofitted it so that I could run my solar. So how did I do it? I kept my lithium batteries relatively near my fire, so within about 6 feet of my wood stove, so that I had a protocol. When I would get to my cabin in the cold, let's say it's minus 35 and I'm arriving into my cabin, right? The first thing I would do is go inside and open up the flue, and I would start a small fire. A small fire because there's not a whole lot of draw in there right now. It's cold. In order to get that air to warm up, in order to get that chimney to really start to pull and move the air around, I need a small fire in there. I need to heat up that flue. So I'll start a small fire first, just to heat up the air and get that flue warm. Then I'll get the fire roaring warm, and then I'll usually wait a good 3 to 4 hours. 3 to 4 hours until everything is warm and I have a temperature gauge in the cabin. And it will tell me once I'm reaching 22 to 23 degrees. And when I reach that temperature, I wait a good 2 to 3 hours at least. What I'm waiting for is for any leftover condensation, any humidity, any dampness that's left around the battery management systems, the BMSs. I'm waiting for that moisture to dry out. And this takes time. And if you want to be extra safe, 24 hours. Once the cabin was to full warmth, then it was safe to start firing things up, right? So that's how I used my lithium system in the wintertime. Now, if you wanted something that was all weather that you could just flip on right away, you could use any kind of lead battery that you can get your hands on. And if you want to spend some high end, well, I noticed Kyle mentioned AGM. What's AGM? So AGM is
glass mat.
absorbed glass mat. That's right. Absorbed glass mat. So what does that do? That is basically a bit of a gel instead of a liquid. And so it's a lot safer for things like boats or any kind of vehicle that you expect is going to be in all kinds of different directions, right? Maybe, not quite rubber side down. So if you're building a serious off-road rig, you might want to go AGM, right? Because you don't have to worry so much about acid coming out of your battery if you turn her over, right? So, but be warned, AGM is not cheap. They're pretty expensive, right? They'll
cheaper
cost you
than lithium.
But they're cheaper than lithium, yes.
And they're heavy.
And they're quite heavy.
Yes.
And I have to agree, AGM is not so great in solar. So why do people like their lithium in solar? This is worth discussing. The reason people like their lithium in solar is that a lithium battery tends to maintain its voltage level quite high right up until it's done.
Yeah.
And this is why it's ideal for sensitive electronics like laptops, computers, anything that's running a chip. So like your phones, anything that's portable and has, look at that. We see a little smartphone there being shown to the camera. Yeah, those devices, they do great on those little lithium batteries because they will run the correct voltage right up until it's time to die, right? Now, there's just one thing to keep in mind about all this lithium stuff, right? Because, you might be thinking, okay, great, I'm going to go out and buy a whole bunch of lithium batteries. Be warned, just like on your phone, the level to which you charge and discharge your batteries when you're talking about lithium does affect their life cycle. And so this is where all those all-in-one systems have basically a tuned battery management system built in, and you don't have to worry about it. You just charge it. Now, that being said, if you're using an all-in-one battery system, try to maintain the charge of that battery between 50 and 80%. Same thing with your phones, same thing with your laptops. And the reason why is that you only have so many charge cycles out of a lithium battery. Let's, I don't know, let's give it an arbitrary number. Let's say 5,000 full charge cycles is being generous, right? 5,000. Now, to get to those 5,000 cycles, you've got to watch the level to which you discharge, and you've got to watch the level to which you charge. If you charge at 100% every time, your 5,000 cycles is looking more like 3,000. On the other hand, if you discharge completely to zero every time with those lithium batteries, again, you are coming nearer to that 3,000 cycles rather than extending to the 5,000. So that's when you're using a built-in charge controller with set points that you don't control. When you are building your own, such as what I've done in my videos, you're in charge of what you set those set points to. What is your low point? What is your high point? What's important about that is to keep in mind that to get more battery life or battery capacity out of your system, you can probably charge it a little deeper. And so let's say the upper level of my charge on a 12-volt system is about 14.5 volts to 14.6 volts, right? If I want the maximum lifespan out of that battery system, say in runtime, I could probably charge it at a 14.6 and leave it as far as that and go no further. But by charging it to 14.6, I'm also fatiguing the battery, and over time it will not last. I am going to remove battery cycles from that battery by charging it to that level. So instead, I could cut it off at 14.5, and then I'm going to get closer to that 5,000 cycles rather than being down into the 3,000. Hey, if you want to be even more conservative, you can keep it at 14.4. And same thing with your depth of discharge. On a 12-volt system, you probably don't want to discharge your lithium batteries lower than 12.1, 12.0. Definitely not lower than 11.9, 11.8. Again,
there's some variability there depending on the vendor, depending on the systems. So keep that in mind. If you cut off your discharge at 12.1, you're going to get many more battery cycles than if you were to let it discharge down to 11.8. So keep that in mind if you are setting your own charge controller settings, if you're setting your own battery management system settings, the set points you run to will really affect the longevity of your battery systems. And a good battery vendor will give you the information about the longevity of those batteries in terms of those set points, right? And so that's typically communicated in documentation in C levels, 1C, 2C, half C. Those are values that represent full charge power, et cetera, et cetera. I won't get into the full theoretics of it. It's kind of heavy and almost mathematical, and that's almost too much for me late in the day. So suffice to say, there's a whole body of knowledge on the whole charging spec side. So the other thing you're going to run into in terms of charging and charge controllers, and that's something that's necessary when you're dealing with solar. So it's the type of charge controller we're talking about: pulse width modulated, PWM, or MPPT, which is maximum something point tracking, power point tracking, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can probably fact check me on this one. So what's the difference between the two? Pulse width modulated charge controllers tend to be kind of small and pretty simplistic. They're usually bundled in with solar panels so that you can quickly bolt on your solar panel to some sort of battery storage system. They're generally sealed, and they'll have a whole bunch of conductors sticking out of it, usually 4, right? 2 for your battery, a positive and negative, and 2 for your solar panel system. So that's PWM charge controllers. And then you've got MPPT, and those are a little bit more complex. Still, you're going to have those 2 main cables types coming in. You're going to have your solar power, you're going to have your battery power coming in, but you might also see other stuff as options with MPPT chargers. Things like temperature sensors, possibly, although you might see some of those also with PWM chargers. I have a small PWM charger where one of the options is to use a temperature sensor. But MPPT chargers are typically what you're going to favor for more complex, more powerful solar systems, especially when you're dealing with a lot of lithium power. Of course, when you're going with MPPT chargers, your cost goes up, right? So if you're putting together a solar system where you're putting these items together, what I recommend is you start first by identifying what kind of usage you expect to have. What are you going to do with it? Is it just to charge portable devices? Is it for an off-grid cabin where you're living full time? Because there are different rules that may apply. If it's a portable system, weight and bulk is going to be a big consideration. If you're talking about something that you want to be able to move to a specific part of the house, let's say in the event of a power outage, your weight and your ability to transport it is going to be a big factor. The way you charge it is a big thing too, right? We've talked about solar so far, but batteries can be charged in many other ways. We've got wind generators. I don't know if anybody here has played with a wind generator.
Not yet.
I haven't yet either. I'd like to. Maybe some of our listeners can point us to what their experiences have been like. But I've played around with DC to DC charging, which is another option as well. Let's say you're kind of mobile like I am. You can pick up what are called a DC to DC charging system, which basically allows you to charge a DC battery system using a DC source. And you can tune this, of course, for lithium systems if you're going to use your lithium power as a backup to your vehicle or integrate that into your vehicle. Let's say you have a camper, that sort of stuff. I see a lot of solar being integrated into campers. So,
sorry, Kyle.
no.
Kyle's got a good one in the chat there.
Good.
Electricity from jumping on a trampoline. Yes, Kyle. You go right ahead and do that.
Oh, if we could generate it from kids, that would be great too. All that energy they've got. So
you were talking DC to DC.
yes,
The eliminator, the Motomaster eliminator power boxes, the little jumping boxes, they come with a DC to DC cable, so you can plug it into your cigarette light. Once you start the vehicle, though, start your vehicle, plug it into your cigarette lighter, plug it into its cigarette lighter, and it will charge as you're driving. Usually 4 or 5 hours to get a full charge from, I think it was like 40%. 4 or 5 hours of driving at a good like highway speed, you'll get a full charge back into that battery box.
I love all those kinds of options for charging because a lot of people in Canada have a vehicle. And
Yep.
so if you just want something that's portable, something that's good for your preps, there's all kinds of solutions. For example, I have a hard time recommending people with a small car to have everything that I carry in my truck. That just doesn't make sense. But if you wanted some sort of charging solution that you can hang on to and leave in your car, bring inside with you so it stays warm, a NOCO booster pack is a fantastic option because you've got power storage in there. You've
Yep.
got enough power in there to deliver it through to a 12-volt socket. And you can charge from a 12-volt socket at the same time. And you can boost up to a V8. So preppers love something that has multiple roles and multiple uses. We don't like a one-trick pony. So I can easily recommend one of those as a great start and go from there. Things that plug directly into your cigarette lighter are great. There's some solar panels that will do that just to top off your battery and keep it from dying if you have to walk away from your vehicle for more than a few weeks. So that being said, there's all kinds of charging systems with DC that you can use. And of course, the one that we all love and use a lot is the generators. So a quick word about generators, and I'm going to leave the floor to a few others here who do have generators. When you're mixing generators and solar, you're going to want to keep an eye on how much charge you're delivering to your batteries at the same time. And so what I'm talking about here is your overall system. So let me explain. If I have a charge controller and I have solar panels going to that charge controller, and from that charge controller, I've got cables going to my battery. The charge controller has a certain amount of current rating that it can handle from the solar panels. The wires going from the charge controller to the battery have a rating for current as well based on their gauge. Also, if your terminals are dirty or somehow not properly contacted in metal to metal contact, you're going to have some power drops as well. So all of these things are factors in your system. So size your wires accordingly. There are all kinds of guides out there to show you how to size your wires. I use the National Electrical Code, which is available from the US. And there's another one that I use as well. It's an engineer one. And these are all available on Google or your favorite search engine. And you can determine what a given cable gauge can carry, whether it's solid core, stranded, and whatever rating that cable is. You can determine what amount of current it can carry and over what distance. This is another factor, right? So again, I'm not going to turn this into a big engineering lesson, but you're going to want to determine what those things are, what those needs are prior to pulling the trigger on any purchase. So here's a reason why. Distance is an issue. In 12-volt systems, 23 feet is a magic number. It's a magic number. And why? Because after 23 feet, you get what we call attenuation. And your current and your power levels drop considerably. Your voltage will drop considerably. And this can damage devices.
You're talking about line loss.
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. So in that event, that's when we typically have to step up the voltage. And so your 53-foot trucks, for example, and their trailer systems, they require 24 volts
because with 24 volts, you've got a much longer distance that you can go. And so this is why on solar systems that have a lot of power will typically be okay with running very high voltage in order to allow that current to transmit over a long distance, because it's DC current, right?
Mhm.
And when you're talking about moving high current over 12 volts, you're talking about pretty thick gauge wires. It gets expensive, right? So beyond a certain scale, you've got to watch your cabling, and cabling can become an expensive issue. Right. The more wattage you need, the more complex your build becomes. So I'll just leave it at that. Keep your sizing basically in mind, right? Your sizing in mind will tell you how many watt hours you need, and the watt hours you need will determine how much battery power you're going to devote. Now, if this all sounds like way too much, then don't worry about it. Just grab yourself a little solar panel and a little all-in-one system, and at least you'll have a way to charge your phones and keep communications up and running if stuff goes down. Because I think that's the most important thing people need these days. They need that contact with people, right? So if that's all you get out of your solar system, that's great. Because a little portable solar system is not going to power your heater very long.
Or at all.
Or at all. I can share a little story with you about battery systems. So a long time ago, before I had all kinds of off the grid stuff around, and I only had one location where I had off grid, which was my trailer, which was on a native reserve, and that's where I had all my power. So back at the house, I didn't have any, and the power went out. And my girlfriend at the time, well, she wasn't all that happy in the morning without a coffee. And so we had a coffee situation on hand, and there was power outage everywhere that I could see. So I pulled out a UPS that I had. This is an uninterruptible power supply. This was a high-end one, a 1500 VA, 1500 volt amps. So this is pretty much the largest size you can get and plug into a 115 volt, 120 volt socket. I can tell you that a basic drip coffee machine will take one of those from 100% on to nothing in just the amount of time it takes to make that pot of coffee. And then it will run out of power and kill it. It will not be able to keep it warm. So I got about 10 minutes out of that 1500 VA UPS in order to make coffee. So please don't think that you're going to operate a hairdryer or run a coffee maker or do anything like that with an off-grid solar system.
Curling iron, hair straightener, coffee kettle, toaster, microwave oven, toaster oven. All of those are over 850 watts. Easy.
All of the
Did I hear that I can't make my coffee? Is that what I just heard?
You just can't plug it into the wall.
That's right. You may need to invest in something that is fossil fuel based for that kind
of. Wait, Eric already has that.
So that's been my experience with solar. Otherwise, if you engineer it to do what you need to do and you think of your workload in mind, and you also work within its limitations, because solar does have its limitations, right? That's why if you do solar and you do battery systems, I recommend you have an alternate charging method. Yes, Kyle, if you plan on spending a lot of power and using a lot of power, and we can talk about what's ideal and reality. So in the solar design world, they say that the ideal is 5 days with no sun, no generation. So if you can spend 5 24-hour days without sun, you've got a solar system that's meeting that high-end capacity. Now, in order to do that, you also have to know how much you're going to draw. And so if you want something that's going to run a typical, say, family with 2 children, a fridge, a washer, a dryer, house heat,
of some kind. Maybe you're running a gas heat, and so you need a fan blower in order to run that gas without the stove, without the furnace turning off, for example. Okay, your power draw needs are quite high. So a good strategy to not overspend in building a solar battery and solar system to handle all that would be to start offloading from the electrical grid, or giving yourself the ability to do all that stuff without the electrical grid. So for example, we know Pierre has a beautiful array of propane cooking tools. I
Yes, he does.
love those options, because in the middle of summertime, when the grid is strained, you can go outside and you've got an alternate way to cook. And so when I was living off the grid, my barbecue, I love that thing. The other thing I used a lot was my Coleman stove outside, right? I almost never used anything electric. Actually, I never used anything electric for cooking. It was all old fashioned.
Your Coleman was a propane or naphtha?
It was a small propane. So I used a adapter hose to go to a large tank.
Yep.
And in the winter time, in the deepest of cold, well, I just used my wood stove heat, and I used that for cooking, and it was great. So there's lots of ways to reduce your utilization of your solar systems, depending on where you are, how your house is put together, and you can reduce your dependency on that current, and therefore stretch out your power solution a lot longer. So that's probably the way I would go, unless your means aren't limited. In which case, hey, go for it and size it all you want. Just remember, though, that the more complex your solar system, the more things can go funny with it. And so troubleshooting becomes more complex too. So other than that, though, I think it's a great way to go. Over the long term, you get the reliability if you size it correctly. I remember oftentimes when I was up there, people telling me there's power outages everywhere. Not affected at all. Right? Not affected at all, because you're off the grid. And so there's a lot of advantages to solar. The independence that it gives you is fantastic. So if I was to tell somebody who isn't into it yet, I'd say start small, the way I did. When I first started with solar, it was a single marine 12-volt battery. And I think I had 2 solar panels wired together with Moretz and a charge controller. And then it was just that basic, and that did the trick for a long, long time. And I was quite happy with that. And then I decided, okay, I want to be able to try to do more things. Okay, well, that means more power requirements. And so then I upgraded to 2 golf cart batteries, right? 2 6-volt batteries, 12-volt golf cart batteries in series are a really great option to get yourself up and running for a battery source that will work in the coldest of the cold. They work great. You just have to keep an eye on the distilled water, right? Do the maintenance, and they work great. I had mine running for quite a long time, probably got abused a bit, but they did fantastic. So you got a lot of ways to do solar on the cheap. There's all these nice fancy new ones. Have any of you tried these all-in-one generators like the one I'm waiting on?
I have.
Terry's got one.
I haven't. But one of the guys that goes to the fish camp with us, cause we're out in the middle of nowhere, obviously no power, no cell phone, he has a CPAC machine. So he has he had a Jackery with solar panels, so he would use that to run his CPAC machine at night and then charge it up during the day and use it again at night.
I think that's brilliant. To me, that's the number one use case for the average Canadian, to have some sort of all-in-one or sealed system. There are more CPAPs out there than preppers, I think. And so if you're running one of these, you should think about it. One of my friends that I went hunting with, he was using one, and he had picked up a DeWalt power station. This is not a small piece of gear. It's an all-in-one piece of kit, right? And so for those of you who don't want to build your own systems, having some sort of construction rated power source is a great idea. Well, we took this thing up north and it petered out on him after 2.5 days. 3 days, he was starting to have a hard time running with it. And so he ended up having to pack up and go home. And so this was a 13-hour drive, and his CPAP is what made him unable to stick it out in the trip. So I felt bad for him. But that's the reality of some of these medical devices. They require constant power. So that could be one of a very good reason to have a solar system. Now, if you don't want to spend big money on batteries, and I certainly didn't like spending big money on them either, I imported mine from China. And as distasteful as that might be to some, there just weren't any available in country or made in the United States at that time. So that was really rough for me to build a solar system at that point. But the cheapest way for me to build it was to buy the cells and assemble the batteries myself. Now, fast forward 2 years, we've now got all kinds of sealed systems that you can use. But you are going to pay. You are going to pay for them.
So Terry has a system they brought to the preppers meet. I had a little look at that. Can you tell us anything more about it, Terry?
Well, it's a Pecron 2,000 watt power system. So you got a series of plugs in it. It's got the inverter in it, the controller in it, everything's in it. You plug a set of solar panels into it, and this thing will generate power. So to add a little extra juice to it, I bought a 3,000 watt expansion. So now I got 5,000 watts of power and 400 watts of input. And I used it at the prepper meet just for a few little things, but I took it to Mossport for a motorcycle weekend, and we made toast every day with this thing, multiple toast. And I just plugged my RV right into it, so it powered the whole RV. Now, not that the fridge was running on propane. I wasn't running the air conditioner or anything, just powering the lights and charging people's phones and running the toaster and doing things like that. And it was sunny, so I was generating more power than I was using. So it was working pretty good. And that's what I bought it for, was to use with my RV, my little mobile bug-out vehicle. And I wanted portability so I could take it with me if I wanted to go somewhere else. And so far, I'm quite happy with it. But I'm still playing with it. I did hook an air conditioner up to it one day, and 5 hours later, it killed it. So if you're a big air conditioning person, you need a lot of power. I just wanted to see what it would do.
Now you're talking like a window shaker?
No, this is a floor model. One of those ones that goes out the window.
Oh, okay, yeah. But still, 5 hours.
Pretty impressive.
But 5 hours. So my thinking was if it was really hot, so you turn it on a couple hours before you go to bed, turn it off. Yeah. By the time you get up in the morning, the sun's coming up, and it should replenish my battery throughout the day, as long as you got sun. If you don't have sun, then don't use the air conditioner. But it's a little bit of experimentation, but so far it's been working good. I'm quite happy with it. I can plug the coffee maker into it. I can plug the toaster into it. I can plug different things into it, and it's fine. Works good for me.
I think that's a great system. I was just looking up the specs while you were chatting about it. I like it.
Yeah, it was. I watched a lot of reviews. It was highly rated as the best bang for the buck, because they can be expensive. And I think, trying to think of what I got about $4,500 into this thing with the expansion battery, the 2 solar panels, and the box itself. And they're always coming down in price too, so it just depends what you need.
And that's exactly it, Terry.
And I was gonna say the one thing, and you did say it, Gunny, but I think it needs a bit of reinforcing. Like anything that we do in the prepper world, if you look at the old analogy, go big or go home, you're going to go home, because you're just not going to be able to afford it. Jeremy mentioned it in the live chat there. Mm-hmm. You're building these batteries. There's no way that anyone here can afford that many batteries. And that's right. A solar system with batteries, in my opinion, and I may be wrong here, and somebody can correct me on that, is I wouldn't have one big enough that I could run absolutely everything in my house all the time for days on end. Because that's just going to be so expensive.
It's not worth it.
You just need run your basic stuff, you know, a fridge, a freezer,
Mhm.
you know,
Sump
a
pump.
radio, maybe some lights. You don't need, you know, let's face it, if the power's out, it's nice to have a hot shower, but you don't need your hot water heater. That's a lot of power. You know, you don't need a dryer. Put your clothes out on a clothesline or hang them up inside or do something. Just you know, start small. Have that system that's going to run absolutely everything that is vitally important, and
Mhm.
not panic on or worry about another, you know, several $1,000s on batteries.
So I'm
I
told that if you want to size a, let's take an example here, a 5,000 watt solar with battery system, plan on spending half the money on batteries alone.
Mhm.
Oh, easily that much. Yep.
easily. I went for something that could, on theory, do 3,000 watts, and I never ever used that much power. And here's the deal: if your appliances are using too much power, you could be using the wrong appliance. All of
Yes.
those nice little electrical coolers that are out there, they're
Yeah.
Peltier coolers, they're junk. They draw so much power. You're better
Mhm.
off buying a decent little 12-volt fridge and
Yep.
put that on your solar system, and you'll get much better, but with an actual compressor, and you're going to get way
Mhm.
better performance out of your sealed battery systems, whether you home build them or whether you're using an all-in-one system like what Terry has. Try to not use those Peltier coolers, the kind that you can pick up at Walmart or Canadian Tire. They're
Oh, the
junk.
Coolatrons.
Yeah, the Coolatrons, they're no good.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't
Burn too much
recommend.
juice.
Yeah,
Go
way
get
too
an
high.
ARB.
Yeah,
Go get one from ARB or Dometic.
the
Be a
one
whole lot
that
better.
there's a Canadian store that has that features them, but I don't remember the URL offhand. I'll have to remember it. But yeah, there's definitely don't go for the Peltier based ones. And
Jeremy also makes another comment here in the live chat where he says, and he may have to clarify it a bit for me, but he says, for now, Jeff, home standby generators were the same way 20 years ago. The philosophy I have is, if you're going to spend, I don't know how much of a battery bank you want, but if you're going to spend $6,000 or $7,000 on a battery bank, buy a standby generator.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's kind of getting at is, you know.
Yeah.
I would have to agree. Now, if that's too much to swallow, well, start by preparing in all the other ways.
Yep.
Right? Make sure you've got alternate methods to stay warm, alternate methods to heat, feed yourselves, keep your house safe. Right? There's other ways. People have lived in this country long before we had electrical power, and that's why I loved being off the grid. The challenge wasn't power. The challenge was staying warm, staying fed, and having water. Right. So I would agree. Don't go down the rabbit hole spending 10 grand just so you can have good power with solar. You're still not going to get the same reliability and longevity of usage as you are going to get with your standby home generators, your Generacs. Stick to those for long-term usage. But if you're fully off the grid and you don't want to have fossil fuels involved, it is possible to do it with solar. Just think about it ahead.
And so Robert Lane put a good thing in here too. He said Technology Connections just did a whole video on Peltier. So Robert, what was their opinion on them? Let us know if they thought they were good or bad.
And I think Jeremy clarified that underneath.
Yeah, I was just starting to read that. So yeah, they used standby generators 20 years ago for the sump pumps, the fridges, and now they run everything. And solar is heading in that same direction, which is true. Prices are coming down. But again, your huge expense is your batteries.
Absolutely. Oh, and let's not forget the other one that surprised me is cabling and wiring.
Oh yeah. Sizing the right cable can be a monstrous expense to get the right efficiency in the right weather. Yep.
If you're building your own, don't discount that factor, right? That's the other advantage that you have with your all-in-one systems.
Yeah,
You're gonna
they're
save a lot
pretty
on-
slick.
Yeah, I have
You
to
don't
give
have to
them
do a lot of thinking. You just bring it home and plug it in, and just keep your power demands within a reasonable, and it'll serve you well. Like, I have no issues with the little guy I got. It does what I need it to do, and I don't know how many days I could go with no sun and still have it work. But if you are modest with your power expansions, then you can go quite a ways.
Oh, in terms of your days without sun, I never went anywhere near that 5-day standard. If I had everything on, including my Starlink and my lighting, in the evenings, I got barely 2.5 days when there was a bad snowstorm in the wintertime. So I had to be, mindful of my consumption. So I would not say that solar is the be all end all. It's a great backup. It's good to know about and how to use it and work with it, but it's also good to know its limitations.
So I think, Terry, you're on the right track there. The little system that you've got, even without the expansion pack, you've still got 2,000 watts, right?
Yeah.
So your 2,000 watts plus your 400 watts of panel could easily run.
We're running quite a bit.
Yeah, like it could make your coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
You could make a pot of coffee in the morning, run some little lights around the house, maybe a fan in the wintertime to push the wood stove heat around the house. Throw the solar panels out in the snow, set them up, put the cord in the house. You're charging your panels again. You're charging your whole system again during the day. At night, you're running the fans again. Maybe a toaster oven to heat up something.
Yeah, you could do a little bit. Just keep an eye on your consumption, and as long as you can replace that power the next day, then you can go forever, right? It's just
theoretically
being able to do that. Yeah.
So something for you to research, if you don't know already. When you plug your system into the wall to charge it, do you have to unplug it once it's charged, or does it have a BMS, battery maintaining system, battery monitoring system, or management system that
it'll shut itself off? Yeah.
And then it'll continuously check its battery level and charge only when needed to top itself off.
I found that once it's topped off, I can let it sit for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, and it won't drop. It'll stay at 100%.
But now, are you doing that with it plugged in, or are you doing that with it unplugged?
No, unplugged. I was curious how it would do it, and so far that's what I've been getting on this particular one. Yeah. And full disclosure, I also got a gas generator just in case I have too many rainy days too.
Oh, that's fine.
But that way you've got the best of both worlds too, right? So
absolutely,
you got a little bit of gas if you need it, and the gas generator charges back up too.
A backup for the backup. Spoken like a true prepper.
Redundancy.
So,
and Robert responded, said, yeah, they said the same thing. Though those Peltier or Pelter, whatever you call them, are junk. He proved a whole home compressor fridge is more efficient.
Yes.
A 6-pack cooler drew 60 watts continuous.
Yeah. A little compressor fridge works great.
Yeah.
Get those little Dometic ones or something.
Yes.
A friend of mine bought one at Princess Auto, and they have a good deal on them, and they're a little compressor cooler, and it worked just great. And she run this thing off a little Jackery. I mean, a small Jackery. I'm thinking It was less than 1,000 watts, and it worked pretty good. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the darn thing, but she got it at Princess Auto.
King Canada.
Gotta go find one now.
If I can find the name of it, I'll put it in the comments or somewhere.
If I had to do it all again, I would probably go with a sealed all-in-one system. Now that they've come down massively in price, because it's just easy to transport and move around. Where you need it, you move it. and it's that easy. And it also means that you can store it in the right environmental conditions too. And that's the beauty of your lithium systems. You can charge it and leave it be for 6 months, and it's going to keep its charge for that long, usually, if it's a good, proper system. So it sounds like yours is doing great, Terry.
Yeah, it is. It is. And again, I wanted that portability too, so I could take it with me. I can use it to boost the Ford, right? If I need to, which I've never needed to so far. Just saying.
I see Kyle is on fire this evening in the live chat.
Well done.
If everyone's wondering why we randomly broke out in laughter, it was not because of Terry's poke at his own Ford, although that was good. Kyle asked in the live chat, how much energy will a CO alarm use? 1 hour, 10 minutes, 37 seconds, Kyle.
You're welcome, Alan.
That's the other thing to
Yes,
see.
somewhere, wherever Alan is, he's smiling right now.
This all-in-one machine is it'll tell you when you plug it into something, it'll tell you how much at the current draw, how long your battery will last. 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is. And I can plug it into the RVs, which means I'm running my CO2 detector and all that stuff that's in here, except the fridge. The fridge run on propane, and I was drawing 172 watts when I was at Mossport, and my solar panels were putting out like 300. So I wasn't using as much as I was generating during the day. At night, of course, it's going to be the other way around. But yeah, it's kind of neat, and you can you can want to monitor your usage at the same time. If it gets scary, you can start turning stuff off.
You can always start your generator.
Or I can start my generator.
It's true. Yep.
Yeah. So one thing I have to say this, Terry, your all-in-one system, be careful plugging it into your generator to charge it.
Yes.
Unless your generator is an inverter.
Yes.
Your peaks and valleys on that are too much, it'll blow your charger.
Yeah, you got to be careful with those generators, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with delicate electronics and certain things.
Yes.
They need the inverter generator. Yes.
Yes. Let's quickly put a word out about that. The ideal is a pure sine wave for a lot of sensitive devices. And so if you really want to make sure you're using and not abusing your charge controller, when you're feeding it power, try to run a pure sine wave inverter, charger, generator. They do cost a bit more. And if that scares you a bit, I can tell you that the Furman line of generators, I think Honda as well, they put out a really, really clean sine wave. So not technically a pure sine wave, but still pretty clean, and you won't be damaging your gear with those. So those are pretty good Jennies. I'll put my name behind those. They're good.
I know Pierre will agree with that because he has one. It's not a pure sine wave, but it's an inverter, and they run the trailer on it, and we've plugged other stuff into his that's more sensitive than most, and no issues with it. He'll stand behind that name as well.
Yeah,
pretty good. Something that's definitely a consideration depending on what you're running. Like, for example, the Starlink. Starlink is pretty sensitive to bad power, and on some Jennies, it just won't fire up. So definitely keep that in mind for sure.
Good to know.
I think we've covered a lot.
Very good to know. I was just going to check in. We're at the hour 13 mark. Let's see if there's maybe any last minute things any panelist wants to toss out there. Or do you think we've covered it pretty good?
Yep, we got a lot out there. I think we're good.
I think so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well then, we'll move into the podcast challenge. I know this one's going to be shocking for everybody, but for the podcast challenge and that was a pun if you didn't get it, but boom, shocking. Haha. Anyways, so you're just getting it now, right? Yeah. So just get out there, put a solar system together, even a basic one that just charges a small little battery for maybe even just a little radio use. I don't know, because I'm a radio nerd, that's where I go. But just something small. Get used to solar power, get used to how it works, and then start building up from there. And we've got, we will move into Jeff's weather blurb. You're muted, Jeff.
Sorry, I thought we were doing the upcoming events first from Terry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my notes are all jumbled around here. Yeah, let's do that. Upcoming events. Sorry, Terry.
Oh, okay. I'll be brief. So we're well into the planning stage of our 2025 annual preppers meet, July 10th to 13th. So mark those dates in your calendar. The plan is we're going to use the Slovenian Hunters and Anglers Club again. It was a great venue last year. Everybody loved it.
Awesome.
Went really good. So the plan is to be back there again. And so stay tuned for some announcements because we got some exciting announcements coming up. So in the immediate or in the near future. So stand by.
Fantastic. Cannot wait. And I'm glad we have the dates this far in advance. It's perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And the
Save
venue.
those shekels.
And the venue is just,
Yeah.
phenomenal. Can't say enough good things about the venue.
Beautiful.
That's just awesome.
High praise.
All right, now we can move into Jeff's weather blurb.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to be brief as well because Verdi's been patient with us. So as I mentioned in the news article section part, Hurricane Helene came ashore into the Big Bend, what they call the Big Bend area of Florida, in and around Perry and Tallahassee and that general area. It then went inland into Georgia, the Carolinas, into the Tennessee area. The Appalachian area of Tennessee and western North Carolina were probably the hardest hit areas. Several towns there were literally basically washed away, wiped off the map. Several dams and levees were either breached or collapsed. There were also several tornadoes that did damage that formed in the outer bands, and that's not uncommon with a hurricane that you get that. The Unicoi, I'm hoping I pronounced that right. It's UNICOI County Hospital in Irwin, Tennessee, had to be evacuated. It was flooded within several feet of the roof. They had to air rescue 52 patients and staff off of the roof. Just as a note, please don't go out and sightsee right now. Don't go out and look at the damage. Don't go out and want to see what's going on. The first responders need an open and clear area to do their work. Let them get in there and do what they need to do. The last thing they need is a bunch of cars blocking the road because people want to go out and look at how bad the stream is flooded or something like that. There's lots of pictures all over the internet. Stay out of their way. Let them do their job. The sooner they can get in there and get the work done, the sooner maybe your hydro comes back on or something like that. So having said that, I'll throw this out there that we could be looking at another potential rinse and repeat. There is another tropical wave trying to form in the same general area that Hurricane Helene came from. Right now, it's at about a 50% chance of making a storm and being named. I think we're going to see that number go up. It's starting in the same general area, down off of the west coast of Cuba, down that direction. And just like Helene, if it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, where the water is so warm and convection is there, this is going to blow up to be another storm. I mean, Helene, if you weren't paying attention, it hit landfall at a Cat 4. Again, it just exploded within days once it got into the Gulf and the warm waters. So I'm watching that very carefully. I'm putting a lot of updates on Discord. So if you're not on Discord and you're interested in this, get out there and pay attention. And as Kyle said, don't forget the linemen, those hydro linemen that are out there working their butts off trying to get your hydro back on. Yeah, stay out of the way. Let them do their work. So
Awesome. I see you get some shout outs.
Yes, I do. So I just want to give a shout out to Greg. He's one of our panelists here. You've probably seen me drinking from his water bottle. So I just want to plug his Bravo bottle. This is our gray bottle. I love the thing. I use it daily. And I've got the little neoprene cozy that comes with it. That keeps it from heating up when I'm in the truck. I've already used it to make a few meals with his little cup that he's got bundled with this. Great piece of gear. I love it. I'll be doing a review on my channel soon enough. Thanks, Greg.
I just put a link in the live chat for anybody who is interested in picking one up. All right. With that, I'll bring episode number 248 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or really your favorite podcast app. I'm pretty sure we're out in all of them now. Please do submit a review. It does encourage the algorithms to kind of push us up to the top or the bottom, depending on how they're working that day. Jeff.
We do record these shows live on YouTube and Facebook. Sorry about that. My phone was ringing. If you want an early peek at the shows, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast, and click the notifications tab. That gives you an alert when we are going live. If you want to reach out to me, you can contact me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
And I can be reached at batbradcpp@gmail.com.
And you can reach me at the Annual Preppers Meet Facebook page or at my personal email, terrylblackmore@hotmail.com.
And you can find me, Frugal Gunny, on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, and on the CBP Discord.
All right, please check out Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there on the live chat. You can also find me on the Discord every once in a while, or email at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. So thanks for joining us. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.